Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and today I want to talk about which Seeker I think is the strongest one. At my tabletop group, we've had a lot of discussion about exactly which of the big four Seekers was the best. Because in our group, we have a clear top four Seekers. We don't think Minty Fan or Joe Diamond makes the cut. They're both very strong characters doing their own thing, but they're just not as strong as the other Seekers. Norman Withers is arguably not a Seeker. And while Daisy Walker and Ursula Downs are both very strong characters, we don't think they make that top four. Not at all. Rex and Mandy, I think no one's going to argue with. Obviously, they make it into our big four, but Harvey and Amanda Sharp are the other two that are actually up there with them. Harvey Walters, because he draws so many extra cards a turn between his ability and Vault of Knowledge, can do really gross things with the Farsight that no one else can really mimic. And Amanda Sharp is just playing a completely different game from anyone else. But what she's doing, duplicating skills, which can be drawing 2 cards or finding 3 clues at a time, is inherently super powerful, and the decks for her are very compelling. So these are the big 4 characters that we've been debating between as to who could be the best Seeker. And also, who could be the strongest character in the game. Because there's an argument that it might be Tony Morgan from the Fighters. But if it's not Tony Morgan and it's not a fighter that's the strongest character in the game, it's one of these 4 Seekers. And recently, I've just finished playing all of these characters. I played Harvey Walters a couple months ago through Circle Undone. I've replayed him very recently through War of the Outer Gods Standalone. And just now on the channel, I finished playing Amanda Sharp and Mandy Thompson as a 2-fisted Seekers only run through Return to the Forgotten Age. Off the channel, I was playing Return to Forgotten Age with my tabletop group as Rex Murphy as their sole Kluver. And I feel, having played all of them very recently, I've got a pretty solid grasp on why I think which one is the strongest. And before I get into their decks, I want to say this so that you can be thinking about it. Of the Seekers, the one that I think is the strongest for the same reason when compared to all 3 of the other decks. That Seeker has got less opportunity cost to pay than any of the other 3 Seekers. And when I say less opportunity cost to pay, I mean that Seeker doesn't have to spend their experience on anything other than the strongest cards available. They aren't being pressured towards anything. And let's talk about opportunity cost real quick with these Forgotten Age decks. You can see, they've got ungodly experience. I have level 40 decks for when I actually compare them. It's Forgotten Age, what are you going to do? But you can see that I've got Ancient Stones and Occult Lexicons and a Scroll of Secrets just to discard the Ancient Stone so I can find it again when I shuffle my deck, and an Archive of Conduits in case things go badly. I have an ungodly amount of experience invested into this being a fighter mandate. And even though this Amanda deck only has 3 experience in its Occult Lexicon, you spent a substantial amount of her time playing Blood Rites and interrupting her plan. Not once did I duplicate deduction 3 times in a turn. It just never happened, because between the Explore mechanic making things like Shortcut not work, and having to constantly stop what I was doing to play Occult Lexicon, and then the Blood Rites, it just never really got off the ground for Amanda either. And neither of these characters performed as a Kluver at the level you would expect them to. So when I compare these 4 characters, I'm going to be comparing them in the context of only finding clues. If you just build them as hard clue finder, and you get so many clues that your team is meant to compensate for your lack of ability to fight, and you can argue that that's sometimes a bad decision, but with characters that are this good at finding clues, it's usually the right one. So let's go through our more reasonable 40 experience decks in alphabetical order. And at the end, I'm going to tell you which one I thought was the strongest and why. This is what I view as a pretty standard Amanda deck. You have the strong skills that draw tons of cards, you have the Cryptic Research that draws tons of cards, Deep Knowledge if you need it, and Practice Makes Perfect to duplicate them, because your real plan is to duplicate and abuse Deduction. The ideal turn for this deck is straightforward. Deduction goes under you, Red Blood Man goes into play and boosts your book to 6, totaling 8, and you start shortcutting around. You investigate 3 times with Deduction level 2. And you do that as often as you possibly can, and the Red Blood Man means you basically can't die because he'll soak all the damage dealt to you. The Harvey deck is quite simply abusing Farsight to its absolute fullest. You will need a bulletproof vest to stop your thrice damn curiosity from ever killing you. It's also why you run 2 of Jeremiah Kirby. Or Mr. Rook if you're untabooed, that would obviously be better. And then you've got recursive draw assets like Grizzly Totem and The World, combined with really powerful events to find clues, seeking answers, extensive research, or just burning the Midnight Oil if you need to use your Farsight on something. These true understandings could definitely be something else, same with Working a Hunch. There's about 4 cards in this deck that can easily be flexed to something else. And honestly, it probably should be, let's just change it now. Like, I look at that and I immediately know what I should have done. I've now changed it out to practice makes perfect and plan of action, because that's always where we're going to end up, let's not pretend. But this deck is very straightforward in what it's doing. It's just abusing Farsight to the absolute fullest it can, because you're not actually spending your cards or actions drawing. It's just happening passively through Grizzly Totem, the World, Vault of Knowledge, and Harvey Walters' own ability. This is a deck that can draw 4 additional cards every turn without actually playing anything that says draw cards on it, which is wild. And that lets you abuse double Farsight very, very efficiently. Mandy is just doing the broken Seeker thing. Mr. Rook combined with her ability lets her super efficiently comb through her deck with the scry mechanics. You will lose a fair few of them to Shock and Discovery, but that's a price worth paying. And after you've paid that price, what you're going to be doing is using Practice Makes Perfect to duplicate Enraptured for Infinite Pendant in the Queen, or Deductions for ridiculous clue finding speed, cycling your deck very quickly over and over and over again, and just being a very powerful Seeker. And coming to this Rex deck, there's really nothing that synergizes with Rex, like Magnifying Glasses do, but what Seeker doesn't want Magnifying Glass? The Rex deck is just running the strongest Seeker stuff available and then drawing an additional deduction every turn. It's very simple and very powerful. And now I'm going to go back to the decks, I'm going to explain why each of them isn't the best deck. And again, the name of the game is Opportunity Cost. Starting with the Amanda deck, this is sort of the poster child for high Opportunity Cost. The reason I picked 40 experience for comparison decks is because that's the amount I needed to finish the Amanda deck. There's nothing in this deck that I view as non-core. It's all incredibly important. Without needing occult lexicons, you can cut the cryptic writings down to the level 0 versions, you wouldn't need them. And you can argue that the Red Gloved Men are technically optional, but what they're doing is making you safe to the Mythos deck, as well as ensuring that every deduction you play, and you're playing many deductions with this character, those deductions are basically auto success with the Red Gloved Man, and without him, you're going to need to commit something like a Promise of Power or a Dream Diary to it. And that's fine in a vacuum, but when you need to do that 3 times in one turn, every 3rd turn at least, you don't have that much steam. The Red Gloved Man is actually pretty core to what this deck wants to do. So this deck just costs so much experience. And it's not that it costs so much experience. Every deck at 40 experience costs 40 experience. It's that the whole deck kind of needs to be here. Coming over to Harvey, the whole deck doesn't need to be here, but a lot of it does. You need to get these Farsights. You need to get this Bulletproof Vest. You might not need Grizzly Totem and the World, but you're going to need one or the other to really reliably keep double Farsight online. And already we're looking at a 14 experience deck. And really, if you have double Farsight, you need these Seeking Answers to capitalize on them, so an 18 experience deck. Also, you currently have too many allies, so 21 experience deck once you hunt the Charisma. And then the bells and whistles cards in this deck are ridiculously strong. Economy on Extensive Research, Economy on Cryptic Writings, Upgrading Deduction and Perception, a second passive draw card, Segment of Onyx, that's the thing that wasn't in our core cards. Even though Harvey Walters is really strong and every experience you spend on him is incredibly good, you're being pressured into spending this experience on the Farsight package. Imagine, like on a scale of 0 to 10, Farsight on Harvey Walters is 10 out of 10. It's the best a card could ever be. But on every single Seeker, you could have gotten Cryptic Research or Deduction level 2. And those are like 9 out of 10 cards. Not quite as good as something that specifically synergizes with your character like Farsight does, but still incredibly good. So even though you're getting this super good card, compared to what other Seekers can just do by just defaulting to Arcane Research and Deduction, it's not that much better. And coming over to Mandy, it's the same story. To a much lesser degree though. Without Taboo, Mandy is arguably the strongest character in the game, but with Taboo, you gotta upgrade this Mr. Rook immediately. If you want an ally, and you probably do because there's some sick allies, you're going to want a Charisma. And since you have Enraptured and you're a Seeker, you want the Pendant of the Queen. And right now we're looking at a 12 experience deck. And that's the smallest core of cards we've talked about so far. But it's still a core of cards that cost the same amount as 2 copies of Cryptic Research and 2 copies of Deduction level 2. And you're not that much better when you make these upgrades in Mandy compared to just getting Cryptic Researches and Deductions in any other Seeker. Which is why Rex is the strongest Seeker. There is no opportunity cost to Rex. Every single card in this deck is a bells and whistles upgrade. There is not a single one that is core to his functionality. And that's important because this is a 40 experience deck. If you spend 12 experience on something else, then you're cutting something from here. Maybe it's Hiking Boots Janae and you're no longer able to evade enemies for your team, and you're no longer getting the movement tech from here or skipping clues with Janae by throwing them to non-victory locations. Maybe it's the Eye of Truth and you're not giving your team this additional copy of Promise of Power to pass skill tests in the Mythos phase that functions as recursive ward protection. The Eye of Truth is an insane card. Did you hear what I just said? It is no downside Promise of Power that can double duty as a recursive ward of protection in a lot of situations. That's wild. But it almost never gets put into Seeker decks because you're busy doing other things. Even at 40 experience in this Rex deck, there is no card I put in this deck that doesn't immediately and meaningfully improve it. And that's the problem with all the other Seekers. The things that synergize with you are making you better than the things that don't, but it's coming at the cost of some of them. Sure, at 30 experience you've got in your Cryptic Research and your Deduction, but you're just behind a different 12 experience now. Now the 12 experience you're behind is Archive of Conduits, Hiking Boots, Pathfinder, and Upgraded Perceptions. There's always something from this list of broken Seeker cards that you're not getting because you wanted to abuse Farsight. That opportunity cost is what makes Rex the best. Rex started off the best at level 0. In Scenario 1, Rex came in with Deduction every turn, and that made him the best immediately. That and his Dunwich class. Let's not overlook that Lucky Cigarette Case is doing almost the same thing as Vault of Knowledge and Harvey. Yes, Vault of Knowledge can help your teammates, but most of the time it's going to be going on you, and Rex will usually trigger Lucky Cigarette Case on himself every turn. Leo DeLuca is just Farsight in an ally slot for 4 more resources, which is the least flattering way to describe one of the best cards in the game, but Leo DeLuca is still doing the same thing a Farsight does for 0 experience. Really 3 because you have to get the Charisma. Faustian Bargain is just one of the strongest economy cards in the game, and Promise of Power is absolutely fantastic. With 3s in your defensive stats, testing at 7 tends to just mean you're going to pass, at least on standard difficulty. And something I want to mention is in my original Rex deck, I have it tagged as support. I've got Healing and Draw for my team. 3 out of my 5 economy cards in Crack the Case and Faustian Bargain can be used on my teammates. Cryptic Research, Deep Knowledge, those can be used on my teammates. Shortcut, usable on my teammates. Eye of Truth, Promise of Power, usable on my teammates. This Rex deck is actually a meaningfully important support character in this group, despite being the best Seeker at finding clues by a substantial margin. But the main point of this video, the reason I wanted to hammer in why I think Rex is so strong, is because there's always an opportunity cost. It's hard to see when you're building Mandy that getting Mr. Brook has a downside, because he's so obviously the best upgrade available to you. And it's all of these little things where you're getting your Farsights online, or setting up to duplicate skills with the Red Gloved Men, where you're spending experience that isn't the best experience in the game for anyone else, and that minimizes how meaningful it is for you. Originally, we thought that Rex was the strongest level 0 Seeker. Absolutely, going in Scenario 1, he's obviously the best, but he'd slowly be gained on by the other Seekers until they passed him, and over the course of a campaign, it'd be hard to say what was the strongest Seeker. That was how we felt about it. Having played them now, that's not the case. Because, yes, Mandy's getting a better upgrade than Cryptic Research. She's getting a Mr. Brook and Mandy fucking Thompson. It's insane. But Cryptic Research is still incredible in anyone. Every time someone's spending experience on something that matters to them specifically, they're falling behind Rex a teeny tiny bit. They're not pulling ahead of Rex as they're getting Mr. Brook and Mandy. They're slightly catching up to Rex because they're spending their experience ever so slightly more efficiently, but the gap at level 0 is enormous. Anyways, I've been rather incoherent. I just wanted to make a brief video explaining why I finally conclusively feel like Rex is the best Seeker, and also why Amanda is probably not even staying in my S tier, which is unfortunate for her. I legitimately did not realize just how brutal the opportunity cost for being Amanda was. She's really, really strong still, don't get me wrong, but she's not an S tier character. There's too much experience going into this. Anyways, I hope you liked the video. I'd be interested in hearing any conflicting opinions you may have, or if you have similar thoughts about different parts of the game. And I'll see you in the next one.